US President Joe Biden spoke with Benjamin Netanyahu Wednesday about potential Israeli retaliation against Iran. It was one of several topics the two leaders addressed during a 30-minute phone call. The White House says Biden also urged the Israeli Prime Minister to minimize civilian harm in Lebanon, and they discussed the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Biden has cautioned Israel against attempting to target Iran's nuclear program.
Let me just give you a couple of top lines on the call. It lasted about 30 minutes. It was 30 minutes long. It was direct. It was productive. Obviously, the call that the president had with the Prime Minister of Israel. They discussed a range of issues. So as you all know, the U.S. and the Israeli government have had discussion since last week. Certainly since after the Iran attack. And so those discussions continued with the president and the prime minister.
Well, for some more analysis on this story, we can bring in David Wood, who's the Lebanon senior analyst for International Crisis Group. Thank you very much for speaking to us on France 24. I want to start with a few days ago, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu urged the people of Lebanon to turn away from Hezbollah. How has that been received by the population?
So it seems as though, from as much as we can tell, that there are growing voices inside Israel to go further than just pushing Hezbollah's fighters away from the border and preventing rocket fire as a means to achieve that aim. And the video the other night from Benjamin Netanyahu caused a lot of concern in Lebanon because it seemed to be suggesting that Lebanese who are not connected to Hezbollah and do not support its involvement in the war should stand up and take back their country, as the Israeli Prime Minister phrased it. But to many in Lebanon, they had a reasonable fear that this was basically a call to violently resist against Hezbollah. And at this incredibly sensitive time, when there's already much debate in Lebanon about whether Hezbollah should continue to be involved in the war. This is an incredibly sensitive time where there's many displaced in the country, and raising these kinds of questions, such as domestic parties actively confronting Hezbollah about its involvement in the war and perhaps its position within Lebanon's political scene, is an incredibly risky and dangerous thing to do, which could lead to widespread violence and even civil war.
And do you think with Israel's intensified attacks on Hezbollah and with the killing of Hassan Nasrallah, its leader, do you think we're witnessing the demise of the group?
Well, without a doubt, Hezbollah has obviously suffered very serious damage in the past few weeks and months as well, but especially in the most recent weeks. That much is undeniable. However, we have also seen that Hezbollah has regrouped to the extent that it continues to fire rockets into northern Israel and continues to confront Israeli troops conducting incursions as part of a ground invasion of southern Lebanon. So while the group has undoubtedly been weakened from where it was even a month ago, it is clearly not defeated and is continuing to carry out military operations against Israel.
And the Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant promised a deadly and surprising attack, he said, on Iran in response to their ballistic missile fire. What do you think that Israel could target, and how much of that depends on Washington?
So obviously Washington will be very fearful of a direct confrontation between Iran and Israel. And I think we saw with Iran's attack last week that while Iran did not hit too many sites, it's clear that it showed its capacity, to overwhelm Israel's air defenses potentially. So Washington and Israel as well will be aware of this risk. It would seem to me as though the most likely target would be some kind of military infrastructure. It would obviously be more risky again for Israel to target nuclear infrastructure that's in Iran. But we'll need to see exactly what Israel determines will be its retaliation, and I'm sure that the Americans will be part of that discussion.
And if they do attack nuclear sites or oil facilities, do you think that this would in turn prompt another response from Iran towards Israel? I mean, we didn't see that much real damage from their missile fire just over a week ago. What could we expect?
So Iran is a very cautious player, relatively speaking, when it comes to military operations. And we've seen that in its two direct attacks on Israel, which have showed some level of restraint, even though the second was more impactful than the first. But equally, if Iran is pushed and feels as though it needs to retaliate, it has the capacity, as far as we know, to fire missile and rocket attacks like it did last week for months. And that could potentially overwhelm Israel's air defenses. So while I'm sure that Iran does not want the conflict to escalate to that level, it does have capacity to inflict real damage, it would seem, on Israel in that kind of scenario.
And Lebanon has been in a presidential vacuum since 2022. Could this war put pressure on Lebanon to kind of come out of this caretaker government, or do you think it's only going to exacerbate the situation?
So I think it's very unlikely that we will see a new president in Lebanon before the end of the war. But on the other hand, since the economic crisis began in Lebanon in October 2019, Lebanon's political leaders have resisted reform and instead continued to maintain the same broken system, which serves their own selfish interests very well at the expense of most Lebanese. However, the end of a war could actually be the kind of major event which could push Lebanon's political elites to come to the negotiating table and reach a compromise, which is another key reason to end the violence right now, move to a ceasefire in Lebanon, and then potentially unlock the domestic situation.
David Wood from International Crisis Group, thank you very much for your analysis.
Thank you.